Coming up on this episode of The Social Hour, tweeting via email. It can be done, and you might want to do it. Brands are moving to Pinterest. Oh boy, now we've opened the gates. Facebook's dedicated feed for pages, and Home Depot loves cats. It's true. All that and EverySignal up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Audio bandwidth provided by the new Winamp for Android, featuring wireless sync and one-click iTunes import. Now with free daily music downloads and full-length CD listening parties. Download it for free at winamp.com/Android. Bandwidth for the Social Hour is brought to you by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is The Social Hour with Sarah Lane and Amber MacArthur, episode 86, recorded Friday, November 16th, 2012. This episode of The Social Hour is brought to you by Ford, featuring available sync. Now you can control your media player with simple voice commands. Enjoy your drive while you easily search and listen to your favorite songs. Check it out on the 2012 Ford Focus and at Ford.com/technology. And by the new Squarespace, which introduces a new content management system, making it faster and easier to create a high-quality website, blog, or online portfolio. Plus more than 50 new features, including mobile responsive designs. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase, go to squarespace.com and use the offer code SOCIALHOUR11. And by social media solutions from SAP. If you're a social media manager at a large enterprise, gain insight and engage in social media in a systematic way with social media solutions from SAP. Learn more at sap.com/twit. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Social Hour. It's episode 86. Because we're going to 86 or so. No, we're not actually. We're going to stay here for an hour and talk about great stuff. From TWiT World Headquarters in Petaluma, California, I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Amber MacArthur, and I'm back in our Canadian headquarters in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, in my glorious basement studio. However, I miss being beside Sarah because last week it was great, and I finally got to see the TWiT studios in Petaluma and do the show from there, and I might have giggled a lot because I was so excited. So apologies for that if you're listening back to the past episode.
It was really fun. Amber and I went and we got Mexican food, and she tried to prove to me that she could eat an entire burrito, but at this particular Mexican restaurant, it's almost impossible to do that. We had quite a time. And
that burrito weighed like 5 pounds, Sarah.
Yeah, my mom made the same mistake the other day, but she came down to have lunch with me. But yeah, it was so fun to have you here, and it was like, Amber and I were both, well, before the show, we're kind of talking, and it's sort of like, this is so easy and fun, but why don't I feel like I knew you better before? And I think it has something to do with the fact that even though we hang out at a designated time every week, it's like it's never just a one-on-one conversation. It's almost like we are aware that it's us and everyone who wants to be involved, which doesn't mean that consciously we're holding back. But it's a different experience. When it was just the two of us, it's like, we could say anything.
It was a very different experience because, like you said, normally we have these public conversations, but still, I think that if you put a camera on us and were listening to us, a lot of it would have sounded the same as the show because basically that's our lives, right? Yes. So in that sense, I think that was the good news. But it was so much fun. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the past episode, you should definitely give it a whirl. It was a blast, like I said, being in studio. But we're still going to have lots of fun, and I think it's even better now, Sarah, because we've already met in person. I met everybody who was in the TWiT studio that day, and so we've just taken the show to a whole new level.
I agree. Now it's like there was ice broken, that was long overdue, and now we can just get down to the meat of social. Let's start with one of the weirder stories, I think, that Twitter has rolled out. And this has nothing to do with API wars, by the way. I know some of you are wondering why we aren't sharing some of the most recent stories about Twitter adding more restrictions to its API and screwing over companies. I think Tweetro is one of the most recent fallen soldiers as far as their business model not working. But this is actually some good news for anybody who wants to email tweets to somebody. Mm-hmm. Now, you might say, why would you ever want to do that? And that was actually my question. But Twitter says, this is actually a feature that we hear people want all the time. for example, if you've got a family member who just isn't on Twitter, or you've got like a breaking news story that you just want to share with a bunch of people easily, that's something that you could obviously retweet. But if for any reason someone isn't on Twitter, how do you do that? I mean, you can send a link to a permalink to anybody. That's fairly easy. But not everybody finds that easy, actually, because you have to click on the date, and then it can be a little bit cumbersome, especially if you're using the web version. So Twitter says, yeah, we are just going to make it easier for you. This is something that's rolling out in the coming weeks, to email a tweet directly from twitter.com. So this is not like cutting and pasting and this and that. This is like just email it on out. If for some reason it either isn't appropriate for a retweet, or you know somebody who isn't going to see this any other way than if you email them. Amber, to me, it feels like just another reason for me to get an email that I might not want, but I'm not the target audience here. I might be the target sender. I definitely have a group of friends that are not on Twitter, and they're never going to see anything that I talk about on Twitter. So I suppose this could come in handy. It just seems like a feature that is for a small amount of people, not Twitter as a whole.
Well, I think when I first saw this headline, I thought two things. The first thing was I would probably use this a lot in the sense that I would be emailing myself things. So not necessarily cluttering up other people's inboxes, but I would email myself stuff that I wanted to perhaps remember, because I use Twitter as a news feed and a source for information for presentations and content and that type of thing. So I could see using it in that capacity, just as a quick reminder email. Also, like you said, for people who aren't necessarily on Twitter. But most importantly, the thing that I thought, first of all, is that people probably should be a little more careful about what they're posting on Twitter, because I think as Twitter gets more popular, Sarah, I don't know if you find this or if other people who are on Twitter find this, but I feel like people are getting a little loose on Twitter, sometimes even a little mean on Twitter, and the environment there, I don't think it's as nice as it first was when it launched, and that's obvious because it's a bigger public audience. But just be careful what you post, because now that can easily be emailed to someone. So let's say you work in a job and you complain about your boss and you take it down 5 minutes later. Well, just so you know that one of your colleagues could have potentially emailed that already to your manager. So be cautious of that. It's not a private world, and definitely not anymore with this.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So emailing from Twitter, web Twitter, of course. This is definitely a web Twitter feature. Which, by the way, I mean, I mentioned that we're not going to get into too many Twitter API wars, but I do think that every time we see something that is added to the web Twitter experience, that's why Twitter doesn't want third-party applications making Twitter a different experience, because Twitter is constantly trying to reimagine, okay, how do we keep the web experience? You go to twitter.com, you're signed into your account, you've got your followers and everything. They want that experience to mimic the same experience that we have on our mobile devices and tablets and software OS as well. Twitter for Mac is going to go away eventually, but that's the whole point, whether you like it or not. I mean, that's definitely where Twitter's going. They want a unified experience. So the more that they roll out features like this, and then third parties don't have those same features, the more they don't necessarily want those third parties to take users away from Twitter itself.
Yeah, so if you think information travels quickly now on Twitter, imagine how much more quickly it could potentially travel, knowing that it's not just on Twitter, but again into email inboxes and wherever it might be. So I think it's kind of a good feature. Now, Sarah, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who will be excited about this next headline in terms of Pinterest removing the ban on commercial use as it adds business accounts. I don't think this is a huge surprise. We know there are a lot of businesses who rely on Pinterest and are finding ways to be able to use it to connect with their different audiences, and I think it's a good move. I mean, they know that this potentially is a growing source of revenue for them if they can figure out how to monetize with so many businesses on board.
Yeah, agreed. If you go to business.pinterest.com, this is the page where Pinterest is saying, okay, you can either convert an existing account. This is, I mean, you can think of it almost similar to Google Plus, where at first Google Plus was like, it's not about brands, it's about people. You got to use your real name. You have to be an individual. There's if you're sort of a brand agenda, this is not really for you. And of course, they relented, not only because there was pressure from people who didn't appreciate not being able to use a pseudonym, but because brands could get a lot out of it. And I think Pinterest is doing the same thing. I could convert an existing account. I don't necessarily want to do that, but you could. Profile a page on Facebook, another similarity. And then you've got your sort of the 4 big points that Pinterest says can be helpful. You tell your story. If you're a brand, you can put your story together with those beautiful Pinterest visuals. Of course, you build your community. You send traffic your way. I've always thought, Amber, that if we were just a little bit more diligent about Pinterest, we could make a really good social hour page. I think we experimented with that, but it's like there are so many ways that Pinterest could be used for things other than design or style or clothing. Or I was having a conversation with Chad Johnson, who also works at TWiT, the other day, and he goes, well, I have a Pinterest page. It's sort of a guilty pleasure. And I said, why is that guilty? And he said, well, because it's like, for women. And I said, yeah, I think we're mostly over that, aren't we? But maybe not for everybody. What's cool is that Pinterest has a few examples of brands that are already using the business pages. I think that that's where you get a better idea of, oh, okay, how would this help me? We've got Etsy here. If I want to click on Jetsetter, I was actually spending a bunch of time on Jetsetter last night because I always like to look at flash sales for travel stuff. So this is, in a way, it's almost like you could use Pinterest to discover. It's almost like how brands have an extra Tumblr account, where most of the time, or at least a good amount of the time, those Tumblr posts will link back to the original site. But this is, again, just sort of a different way to look at it, and not really blog-oriented as much as features of products and services.
Yeah, I'm always amazed how so many businesses get so creative with Pinterest. I know a lot of businesses are just learning to use the tool, but I had an example a while ago. It was an office in San Diego who decided to use Pinterest to get people in the office to submit photos of design ideas that inspired them. And this was based on the fact that the business wanted to redesign their office space, and they wanted to have contributions from people, employees who work there in terms of what type of chairs they should have, everything from furniture to paint to any other design elements. So it's fun when you see these really creative uses of Pinterest. And I think as more and more people start jumping on board, I think we're going to see that continue to grow as far as that being something that's popular for many companies.
Yeah, especially since the Pinterest model, we're looking at this design for what the Jetsetter brand page would look like. This is a model that we see this all the time. It's like, oh, okay, everything's square tiles and visual, and it's kind of laid out on a grid, and it's that Pinterest style. And for a lot of brands, they could change their whole design and make it look like this, but they already have a design. This is just, it's really having a social network page anywhere else. It's just that, especially for something visual, like if you're looking at travel photos or that sort of thing, for certain brands, this makes a lot of sense. People might just prefer to browse Jetsetter this way. So why not give it to them? And then when you're interested enough to click through, then you go back to the page and maybe you'll book a trip. It's great.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. All right, Sarah, so we are a couple stories in and we haven't mentioned Facebook, so we should probably jump into some of the Facebook news. First up, Facebook test makes comments on page posts more like web plugin, including inline replies and ranking algorithms. So Facebook continues to tweak their platform, and seems like every couple of days they change something in terms of the way that things are shown. And this one is kind of interesting, though, I think in terms of affecting the commenting system, and how perhaps previously the commenting system was kind of flawed.
Yeah, I agree. So if Amber were to, write a simple status update on Facebook, right? And there's 100 comments. Amber says, I'm having a great day. And so people are all commenting. Well, when you get about 20 comments in or so, you might see comment number 7 was something relevant that maybe you wanted to reply to, but there's no reply button to reply to a comment specifically. So then you can type in that person's name, and then it should link, and so that they see your comment, and then you can kind of keep the conversation going. But then as a third party, if I'm then going through and reading that, person 20 replied to person 7, there's a lot of sort of like, let's connect the dots that's going on here. So what Facebook is testing out, and I sure hope that they roll it out to everybody, by the way, it's not rolled out to everyone yet, is to make the comment system a lot like the way that their third-party comment plugin works right now. So for example, TechCrunch is one of the blogs that use the Facebook comment plugin. They went from, gosh, I don't know, something, I guess, native WordPress comments at one point. So what we're seeing is, I'm looking at a story that went out earlier today, and there are, gosh, how many comments are there? There are quite a few comments. Well, actually, there's only 9 comments, so maybe that's not a great example. Let's look at a different 2 comments. Oh, come on, TechCrunch. All right, well, for our purposes, this will at least give us an idea of how this works. So Robert Scoble, comment extraordinaire, he's written something. Now, he's also a top commenter, meaning that he's engaging a lot, and there are a lot of folks who go ahead and like some of the feedback that he's given. So he has, I don't know, you'd almost call it like a comment clout type of a thing. Okay. I'm also subscribed to him, so I can see that information right there. Subscribe to him on Facebook, of course. Now, there's 3 folks that I can see above the fold here that replied to this specific comment. Now, you can see view 15 more. If I go ahead and expand that, then I can see the rest of the conversation. Now, the 3 that I've seen here had risen to the top, again, because there were people that liked them. And also, just depending on who these people are and how they've commented in the past, all kind of contribute to that algorithm. So what you should get, really, in this new commenting system, should it roll out to all of our news feeds, is a much more intelligent, oh, okay, here's the initial status update or link or whatever. And then the conversation flows somewhat organically, but then is arranged by Facebook based on what's the most interesting. And then, of course, it's organized based on who's replying to whom, which I love, Amber. I mean, I have to say, not everyone is like, oh, I get 100 comments on all of my Facebook posts. I know that that's not always an issue, but when you do end up, even if it's not your own, I mean, I follow some really popular brands on Facebook, and it's like every status update is, I mean, hundreds of comments and likes and shares and that sort of stuff, and it can be kind of a mess. There's really no conversation to follow at all.
Yeah, it's hard to weed through all of the information. So I totally agree. I think this is a neat improvement. We also have another news headline from Facebook. This one kind of a simple idea in the sense that you are able to take the pages you follow and get that information as far as their updates and remove it from your main newsfeed and look at it just as it exists alone as far as seeing all of the content update from different pages. I'm not sure, Sarah, I would use this all the time if I really care that much about just looking at pages. What do you think?
Well, I'm kind of with you. I have I'll show you guys my pages feed in Facebook, which is pretty much, these are all pages that I have liked. Like Boo the dog, of course. That's an easy one. Oscar the blind cat. By the way, Oscar won a grand prize at the Friskies Awards the other night, so it's very exciting.
Congratulations.
Verona is a Mexican vacation that I took. It's a resort that I was like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. So I ended up liking that. Daily Puppy I also subscribe to. Hipmunk. So you get the idea. I've got some friends and some brands that I follow on Facebook. So if I were to go over to my pages feed, I mean, these are all pages, right? So they're not personal profiles, and in many cases they're not even representing an individual. TechCrunch is, another brand that I follow. So this is kind of just like, what about all of those brands or people that consider themselves brands or whatever that are sort of separate if I don't want them to be part of my newsfeed as well? Now, the thing about it is that you don't actually strip them out of your feed completely. So, for example, Boo the dog has his, Happy Friday, friends, time to go eat cheesesteaks and salad. That's at the top of my pages feed because that's a recent post from Boo, and he's a brand. But then if I go to my news feed, it takes a few scrolls, but here it is again. Now, the reason is because Boo got 31,901 likes on this picture. So Facebook still says, algorithmically, this is interesting enough that Sarah would still want to see this in her newsfeed. But the idea is that not every page post we want to see because, again, it's brands, which means it's sort of a form of advertising. And Facebook thinks that we're all getting a little bit fatigued about that, or potentially. So it's sort of like, here's an area where I can browse all the brands I want to my heart's content. I don't miss anything. But it's not forced into my newsfeed so that I end up saying, Facebook's too noisy. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where I'm not sure the average person really understands, in some cases, the difference between personal profiles or accounts and pages. And I mean, it sounds like a simple thing to many of us who are very savvy in the social media space, but I can't see an individual necessarily wanting to have that functionality. I mean, I think it makes sense for the brands who have pages, because obviously anything that highlights them more and gives them more attention makes perfect sense. But from a user's perspective, I think it's kind of like, meh. Not too exciting. That'll be my new name for things that aren't meh. And I don't think it's a huge improvement from an end user's standpoint.
I don't either. I think in a way it's probably more a way to appease some of the brands that are upset that they feel like they're just getting less click-through traffic because users are seeing fewer of their posts. And Mark Cuban, who is the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, but also is an investor and has a lot of brands in his portfolio, was really vocal this week about how Facebook is just screwing up, and Facebook is not the place that brands should be investing their time and energy in trying to build a community there, because they keep changing things, and where a brand was visible, now they're less visible. And Facebook's sort of like, listen, we're not doing anything to make brands unhappy here. We're trying to give brands, here's a pages feed so that nothing that you're putting out there is actually hidden. But our users, even if they liked a page, don't necessarily want to see every single update. Just like I don't see every update that my friends are sending out. It's usually the friends that I interact with the most, or the ones where maybe it's a big life moment. Somebody gets engaged and there's a lot of thumbs up, and it's like that sort of rises to the top. That all makes sense to me, but if I had to read every single status update that my 700 and whatever friends were adding to Facebook, I mean, I'd never get through it. It would be overwhelming, and I'd probably not visit as much. So it is intelligent what Facebook is doing. I can see why brands are upset, but I think it's Facebook's way of saying, we have all of this data, let's just give them a tab and hope that that's good enough. And we'll see if users are clicking on it.
Yeah, I guess the odd user who sits down on a Friday night with a glass of wine and thinks, you know what, I really want to check out what my favorite brands are doing. I think maybe there are a few of them out there, but maybe not too many. Now, Sarah, one improvement that I think is very cool is our next story as far as Airbnb, who've announced that they are now introducing neighborhoods. So you'll be able to search for unique spaces in terms of places to stay in neighborhoods in a few different cities. It looks like they have Rio de Janeiro, New York, San Francisco, London, Berlin, Paris, and Washington, D.C. so far highlighted on their homepage.
Yeah, this is really cool. And Airbnb has said from the beginning that there are certain cities that Airbnb seems to work for really well. So I think that these cities that they've rolled out with, although Airbnb is in many other cities, these are some of the cities that are already very popular on Airbnb, but also can benefit from breaking down a little bit of why would you want to stay in this neighborhood rather than this other neighborhood. We're looking at San Francisco right now, and the Tenderloin, for example, is a neighborhood, versus the Lower Haight versus Nob Hill. They're all very different. And it gives the user that is thinking, I'd like to stay a week in San Francisco, a much better idea of how do these neighborhoods actually feel. You look at them on the map and you might say something like, oh, I'd like to be central. I'll pick the neighborhood that's right in the middle of the city. But that's not necessarily the vibe that you're going to enjoy once you get here. So if you click through on any of the neighborhoods, like if you click through on the Mission, for example, there you go. They've hired some photographers and some storytellers to give you a little bit more of an idea of, okay, where's the Mission on the map? What's cool about the Mission? These are, this is kind of the vibe that you would get. This is why you'd maybe want to come here rather than somewhere else. And the pictures are really nice. They're nice and big, and they're visual. And of course, Airbnb is in the business of wanting transactions between renters and rentees. So you're not going to see anything like, the mission is pretty crappy. You're definitely not going to want to stay here. There's a lot of, here's what's good about it, rather than here's what's not good about it. But it really sucks you in. I mean, I spent an entire evening reading about neighborhoods in Berlin because I don't know anything about Berlin. I've never been there. And I just didn't have a sense of, I don't know, how does it differ depending on what part of the city you're in? Because, of course, it's a huge city. And I thought it was very eye-opening. I got a really good sense of, oh, okay, this is the arts district. Oh, this is kind of the ritzy area. Oh, this is where, a lot of students live. And that all kind of factors in when you're going to spend a lot of time somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, Sarah, on the show on Friday when we were recording, but after emceeing that Fast Company event, the founders of Airbnb did this really interesting skit on stage. It was almost like a play, and they were interacting, and they were talking about the creative process behind the company. And I never thought of Airbnb as being such a creative company. I thought, okay, they do one thing, and they do one thing really well, and obviously they're very popular. But it was really interesting to see how much the storytelling process had really become part of the way that they sell their brand. And I think this is just an extension of that. So there's a lot happening behind the scenes at that company as far as the teams they put together to be able to give people really great experiences in terms of staying at other people's homes. And they really think about this kind of from the ground up. So a very cool move as far as this additional feature from their service.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really cool. It's just done really nicely. I'm going to be in Paris in a couple of weeks for Le Web, the annual conference that I've just now pretty much attend every year. And it's like, I feel like I'm pretty familiar with Paris. I mean, I've been there a handful of times, even, just in the last few years. And even so, there are a couple of neighborhoods that I realize, gosh, I've never actually seen that canal. Or I've never seen that square. That looks really cool. It's just that much more of a, hey, let's get you familiar with where you might be visiting before you get here. So there's a travel sense, but also the emphasis is on renting an apartment. So it's not so much, here is the museum that you'd want to look at, but more of like, here's the vibe of the community. Because if you're renting an apartment rather than staying in a hotel, you're probably already the kind of person who likes that approach already. So, yeah, Bastille. I've never stayed there. It looks awesome.
Sarah, you have the itch to travel, I can tell.
I know. I can't stop. All right, we've gotten through quite a bit of news. A quick reminder that if you ever miss anything, or you're like, gosh, they talked about that cool neighborhood thing, and I just don't remember what it was called, or you want a quick link, you can always go to twit.tv/TSH. That is where we live on the web. That's where you can catch up on past episodes. Any episode you want, you just click on the episode page, and we've got the link. We've got the embedded video right there for you. And if you want to subscribe to the show, which is totally free, the subscription links are there as well. See, that's last week where Amber is just sitting right next to me. We were
right
so
next
happy.
to you. I know.
It was wonderful. That was
good times.
That was really a fun show. Yeah,
it was lots of fun.
Yeah, before we had to go back to real life. But
real life, so far away.
Yeah. Ontario. Twit.tv/TSH. And of course, you can email us at thesocialhour@twit.tv with any questions or comments or feedback, anything that we talk about. And if you have ideas, send those our way too. Okie dokie, I think it's probably time to thank one of our esteemed sponsors for sponsoring this episode of The Social Hour. And I'm always so happy to talk about Ford, because Ford is like futuristic, awesome stuff, but in reality, they actually have this kind of tech in Ford cars right now. What am I talking about? Sync. Ford Sync is the most, it really is one of the most amazing onboard systems that any Ford owner will say, oh my God, I love Sync. I can't go back. It's like the DVR of cars or something. Here's how Sync works. You can browse your music collection by a genre. If you just absolutely love, I don't know, Imagine Dragons right now. You can go ahead and list songs that way, or a particular song, or maybe a playlist that you've made of all your favorite slow jams or something like that. Now, here's the cool thing. It's all voice command based. So you're not fumbling around trying to, find something on the dial. You can talk to your Ford, and Ford will say, oh, yeah, exactly. I know exactly what you want, and I'm going to play what you want to. As far as playlists go, it'll play a list of music that you're in the mood for. It knows the genres. So if you are, if you're tired of slow jams and you want to get into, I don't know, some reggae or some dance hall or something, you'd be playing something, you play similar music. And your music will continue on that way, when you're kind of in a certain mood. You can listen to your entertainment on pretty much any device, and voice control. So no matter how it's stored, so if you've got a smartphone, you can stream your music via Bluetooth through your nice, cool Ford speakers. On a USB drive, for example, you just bring it in, plug it in, and your music's there. An MP3 player like an iPod or an iPad or that sort of thing, an MP3 player. And iTunes tagging is super cool. This is solving the problem that we all have when you've listened to a song and you're like, what is that song? Oh, I want to write it down. I want to make sure that I bookmark it. And if I don't do this now, I'll never remember. Available Sync with My Ford Touch and HD radio technology uses iTunes tagging so that you can tag a song that you like, transfer that info over to your iPod, and then buy the song from iTunes when you feel like it, when you've got a spare moment, when you think of it again. That is awesome. Best of all of this is something that is available right now. I am not talking about conceptual stuff that Ford hopes to roll out down the road. This is offered on every 2012 or 2013 Ford vehicle sold in the great US of A, including the 2012 Ford Focus. You can get it right now. You can learn more about this and other technologies that Ford is bringing to its vehicles at ford.com/technology. If you spend any time over there, ford.com/technology, get a really good sense of everything that Ford is working on to make sure that its cars are truly at the height of innovation. That's Ford Sync, and thanks so much to Ford for sponsoring this episode of The Social Hour.
All right, Sarah, we have kind of a sad story here, a very sad story. In fact, I call it our hashtag of the week, and that hashtag would be RIP Twinkies. Some devastating news for more than 18,000 workers. It looks like Hostess is shutting down and laying off 18,500 workers after a strike, which just happened at 33 of its different plants. So because of all of this, obviously, we are looking at losing one of the many iconic brands from Hostess, which is Twinkies. And that conversation has ended up in the Twitter space. A lot of people are very sad about this. A lot of people are writing in and saying farewell to Twinkies. In fact, based on this article from the Daily Mail, it looks like there are even people going to eBay and trying to sell boxes of Twinkies. Most recently, one box of Twinkies was listed on the auction site for $500. And the user says, what a better way to say that I love you than with the gift of an American icon that will be gone soon. So as much as perhaps Twinkies are not very good for you, I think we can all agree on that. Sad news that so many people are losing their jobs, and interesting to see the outpouring of people going to Twitter and other tools to say goodbye to Twinkies.
Yeah, this is... Do you feel like people are making too big So there's a strike which forces layoffs and closing of plants. And the Hostess brand may not be as strong a brand as it used to be, but this is temporary, right? This is not necessarily, we'll just fold the whole thing and never make any more Twinkies.
Yeah, I mean, I think, though, based on at least the headlines that I've read, that it doesn't look good for the brand overall as far as Hostess. They've been around for, I think, more than 80 years, and the reality is the future doesn't look too bright. So I think you're exactly right. I don't think they're saying outright right now, oh, no, we're not going to be making Twinkies anymore. It's over for us. But I think that's kind of what's being implied based on the state of the company right now. So who knows what will happen, but I guess the good news for them is that they have a lot of fans on Twitter and other tools.
I suppose. Now, I had a lot of friends of mine, Amber, tweet about, Twinkies, and this and that. And it's like, I have never once, not only have I not seen you eat a Twinkie, I've never heard you mention one. And yeah, they're not good for you. And hey, if you want to eat Twinkies, it's far be it for me to try to stop you, but it's like, it sort of turns into this nostalgia thing, right? Like, Twinkies,
totally.
you know, when we were all kids, Twinkies seemed like the best thing ever, and now they're really disgusting, and, you know, who's actually eating Twinkies? But yeah, some folks in the chat room say Hostess is going to sell a variety of its brand. So, you know, Twinkies are probably the most well-known, but you've got cupcakes and ding-dongs and snowballs and some other stuff that I've never even heard of. Yeah. So...
Who knew? Who knew?
Know.
Yeah, I think when you look at it just from the food perspective, I personally have never. I don't think I've ever had a Twinkie before, and I'm sure there are lots of people who love them. But when you look at it from the perspective of the company and how long they've been around, and all of the employees who are going to suffer through all of this, I think that's where the story really is. Not necessarily the fact that we need Twinkies in our future, because the reality is, I don't think any of us would agree that's an important food group. Although there is someone in the chat room who said that. It's just an urban legend that Twinkies are bad for you. I think they're lying.
Oh, really? Well, yeah, an urban legend. I love that. It's an old wives' tale.
they're in fact really
you know,
right
they're
there.
actually full of vitamin C and niacin. I don't buy that. There's also an urban legend that, you know, if you eat a Twinkie, your body wouldn't decompose later in life, because the Twinkie itself also doesn't, and then you'd be full of, you know, these sort of forever
actually
chemicals.
buy into that. I can see that happening. That's one thing I might believe out of this whole conversation.
Might be a little bit more true. But yes, I saw quite a spike in Twinkie tweets this morning as well. So people do care, it turns out.
It's a fun headline, fun hashtag, right? People love it.
Yeah.
All right. So for our social tip this week, I know we have a lot of Hootsuite users who have tuned into the show, and you'll be happy to hear that Hootsuite has come out with a few new features. One of them being the ability to go in as a team, if you work at a certain company and you're managing a brand, to go in and have conversations within the tool about that specific brand. So you can really collaborate with the people who are also using Hootsuite within your organization. I think this is a fantastic thing, because we've seen so many issues, particularly with Hootsuite recently, where there are multiple people managing a social media account within the tool who then send out a tweet by mistake. They do something that could damage the brand. So the idea that you can have conversations within the tool, you can approve messages before they go out, and you can communicate with your team and have conversations about what the reply should be to certain tweets, it just gets more people involved in the process. Maybe a little cumbersome as far as how long it may take to send out messages, but I think in the long run, it could be a good thing.
I think so too, especially since every other week we have a great example of something that's sent out that ends up making a business look careless.
Exactly.
Because they didn't have the right tools. You know, maybe it's like, oh gosh, that person thought that they were logged into their personal account. Crap, now the account looks really bad. Or there's some signals that get crossed. And yeah, again, we've talked about this quite a bit. Is if you're one individual, that's hard enough. But if you're a team of several people, or even more than that, then tools like this to help keep things organized, you know, before you end up saying anything that's going to interact with your community, makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. Before something escalates and becomes a really, bad news story for your brand.
Yeah, and you can use it as, as an internal messaging tool as well. So it's not just about, let's ready this message before we blast it out on the internet, but communicating between people who are working on the social side of business in general. Hootsuite is quite a robust tool. I mean, they just keep coming out with stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, Sarah. So I'm interested in this next story because I see your notes beside it, and it says Sarah thinks daily email is too much.
Yes, that's the notes that I wanted to make sure that I told everybody about, because the spotlight for this week is a service called EverySignal, EverySignal.com. And what I went ahead and did was, when you go to EverySignal, it asks you to connect to Facebook and LinkedIn, I believe. I believe so. I think I'm connected to Facebook now, and then I could go ahead and add LinkedIn. In fact, I'll do that in real time. Why the heck not? Well, now I have to put in my password. I don't want to do that. So we'll just use my Facebook information. Here's what's kind of neat. Okay, so EverySignal makes the attempt to parse a lot of what people are sharing. So I've got, Rebecca Sills had a birthday, and Gavin Purcell might be talking about a new baby. Now, I know Gavin Purcell, he used to work at G4 with me. It's like, well, he has a couple of kids, but you see that what the message actually was about is that he posted on Facebook, tonight a new musical Jimmy Fallon franchise is born. He works on the Jimmy Fallon show now. So born got flagged as Gavin Purcell might be talking about a new baby. Now you notice that EverySignal doesn't say Gavin Purcell had a new baby, but it's sort of like, hey, you might want to look twice at this message that we were talking about crowded news feeds earlier in the show that you might not have seen otherwise, or maybe you scrolled past. So let's see. Somebody had updated their location to Hermosa. Somebody may be talking about travel. My friend Hunter he is talking about travel. He's not talking about his own travel. He's talking about the TripIt owner launching a trip fund to invest in travel. So there's these keywords that EverySignal is attempting to flag, so that I get to know more about what my friends are talking about specifically in categories. I love this. Now, what I meant really by daily email is a little bit too much is when you sign up for EverySignal, by default, you get a daily email digest based on, again, what your friends are talking about. And I found that to be just too much. There was a little. This is me looking at EverySignal just in general. I'm logged into the site, and I can go ahead and say, oh, let's go ahead and look through anything that might be birthday related versus education versus relationships. Like, did anybody break up? And who's here and there and that sort of thing. But EverySignal will also send an email digest that tells me a little bit, almost more. It's sort of like, here are the top 5 friends that did something, in the realm of travel or babies or location or whatever that you might be interested in. I find those less helpful. I think this is a great tool to check in once in a while, but I don't really want anything in my inbox that often. Yeah,
I love this, though. I think there's a huge issue with social media sites, particularly with Facebook and Twitter to some extent. And I have this problem all the time. There are friends of mine, and things are happening in their lives, and I just don't see that it's happening. The only place they update it is on Facebook, because the average person maybe only follows a certain number of people or friends a certain number of people. But I miss a lot of that stuff. So I'm going to sign up for this for sure, Sarah. I think it makes a lot of sense. And as more and more as we get inundated with so much information, I can just see tools like this being so important to be able to weed through all of that content and all of that data. So this is a keeper. Love it.
Yeah, it's great. And by the way, obviously daily digest emails, I just get a lot of those, so I'm always like, the email's not good. If you're like, well, maybe it would be great. I'll show you an example of what it looks like. This was from November 8th. This is actually the day that Jeff Stewart had a birthday. Jeff Stewart, editor of The Social Hour. So I was sure not to miss it. Not only did I see that he had a birthday, but I could go ahead and say happy birthday right from here. And then it would post on Facebook. Because, again, I'm connected via Facebook. Glenn Rubenstein, another coworker here, was talking about travel. He wasn't really, though. He was talking about a vacation. Anyway, more keywords. But that's what it looks like. If for some reason you go, I like emails, that's fine with me. So there you go. That's EverySignal.
Love it. That is very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we have an ad coming up, but lots of good feedback coming up after the ad for this week, Sarah. Emails and suggestions and links and lots of fun stuff.
Yeah, we sure got a lot of feedback. Feedback in general has been really awesome. So thanks to everybody who gives us feedback. But yes, let's take a little break and thank Squarespace for sponsoring this episode of The Social Hour. It's not just Squarespace, it's the new Squarespace. Squarespace is better than ever, and if you haven't checked it out lately, now is the time. Squarespace 6, actually. And Squarespace has always been about, hey, if you're not a designer, you can have a beautiful website. If you are a designer or you like to code, Squarespace is for you too. And no matter who you are, you've got good customer support and a lot of customizable features. That's sort of the beauty of Squarespace. That's why I've been a customer of theirs for a long time. New Squarespace is just a whole new product, a whole new code base. For example, images render 7 different ways, so that if someone's browsing your site on a smartphone, back in the day, you just sort of had one site and you hoped that it would look okay, and that just wasn't always the case. So Squarespace is making basically 7 different versions every time you update the site, so that no matter how anybody is accessing your content, it looks awesome. So this is for anybody who wants to create a high-quality website, a blog, or an online portfolio. You know, a lot of us these days say, well, you know, we're not necessarily blogging all the time, but I really want this very professional place where somebody can look me up and they get all of the links to everything that I'm doing. There's high-quality photos. I can embed videos. If I'm really, really active on a variety of social networks, I can have these dynamic widgets that are part of the site. A lot of the templates on Squarespace 6 reflect all of that. You really have a lot of options, and the sites have a wide range of looks and feels. So it's a really, really, really good way to kind of just, I don't know, think about it starting fresh. Now, if you're already a Squarespace user, you can obviously roll over to Squarespace 6. But if you use some other blogging platform, you know, you're on TypePad, you're on WordPress, that sort of thing, you can port over all of your content to Squarespace as well. And you don't lose anything. And, you know, there's truly nothing to lose at all. Squarespace also will not hold your data hostage, so you can always export your data as well. So there's no reason to think, oh man, you know, if I do this and then, you know, one day I've got a different life and I change my mind, then all my content will be here and it's going to be a mess. Not true. Squarespace is absolutely for the user and wants to make it as easy as possible, not only for you to update an amazingly awesome looking blog, but for it to be yours, and you can control it. So what do you do now? Well, why don't you try just a free trial? Give Squarespace a spin and see if you are into it. You can sign up for a free account. It's easy as pie. You don't need a credit card. You don't need to tell them anything about you. You don't need to commit to anything. You honestly just try it out and start building your website. Any website. Pick a template or start from scratch. I don't care. And if you decide to purchase it, use the offer code SocialHour11. So that's SocialHour11, all one word. And you get 10% off your first purchase on new Squarespace accounts. They've got monthly and annual plans and free domain registration for annual plan subscriptions. So when I was saying, you know, you build yourself a beautiful landing page. Now, I've got saralane.com. That's my landing page. You can go ahead and get domain registration if you go with an annual plan. That's squarespace.com, and use that offer code SocialHour11. And we thank them so much for sponsoring this episode of The Social Hour. Amber, should we get into some of our viewer feedback of the week?
Yeah, let's do it. First up, Scott Redding sent us a link to Panic Software's tweet to email gateway. He says, I know it sounds crazy, but their explanation about using this with a group of people for a single account instead of something like Hootsuite is interesting and could apply to many listeners of The Social Hour. So I went out and checked out the Panic blog as far as their tweet to email gateway. And it seems that this tool, which I believe is called Burnside, the idea is basically for customer support. This is a way that you can manage all of the tweets coming in a more effective way than just using Twitter. Yeah. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, I understand it to be the same thing. And this is really for administrators. This is, you know, this is a bunch of code that Panic. By the way, Panic, I've known about this company for years because they, back in the day, made this great FTP Mac application called Transmit.
Yep, I know that one too.
Yeah, still use it. They also are the makers of Diet Coda, which is a really cool, code program for iOS, for the iPad, and a variety of other things too. So amazingly cool company. But they don't have a lot of experience just sort of throwing code up on GitHub and letting people take it from there and make it their own. So this was a post, that they threw up on their blog that explained that what they spend a lot of time doing is replying to customer feedback on Twitter. Of course, I mean, brands do that all the time. Panic said, what we don't really like, though, is the web interface for like rapid fire, high volume tasks like answering support questions. They said the Twitter part of it is awesome because it keeps you to, 140 characters. So that part of it is great. Somebody has a question, you answer. So there's sort of the quick back and forth that happens. But wouldn't that be nice if the tweet could come in to some sort of an email interface, then you tweet, then you basically reply to that email, and then it goes back to that original Twitter poster. They said they have a plugin for Apple Mail that displays a character count in the Mac OS X mail window. This is for Mac, by the way. And it's their first foray into open source. So if this sounds something like either as an admin, you feel like, oh, I could really take advantage of this, definitely check out panic.com's blog post. We'll have the links in our show notes. Or even if you are not so much a GitHub type of a person, if you know somebody who could benefit from this, it's definitely worth checking out. I don't, again, we were talking about being able to send a tweet to someone via email, and this is all about replying to and sending tweets via email, kind of two different things. But Amber, I guess there really is a market for all of this. People just are in email already, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things is that with some of these tools, so many people use them so differently, right? There's different audiences, there's different things that make sense. You know, Hootsuite's going to work for some people. This tool is going to work for other people, depending on what they really need this for. So thank you so much for your feedback, because I know there probably are groups of people who are listening or watching who would really appreciate this, Scott. So thanks for sending us that email.
Absolutely. We got another email, actually. Who sent this one? Mark. Mark sent this and just said, this is a crazy social media nightmare story. This seems like something that you gals should be aware of. And it is truly a social nightmare story. This is a story about how a woman who had the same name as another woman kind of had a huge identity confusion. Her name is Nida Soltani. And here's the story as I understand it. Back in 2009, a woman was shot and killed in a demonstration in Iran, in Tehran. And her face became part of a protest movement. So this is, somebody had signs, at rallies, they're holding up her face. But it wasn't the same woman. It was a different woman who had a similar last name. So the university teacher named Nida Soltani was incorrectly identified as someone who had been shot dead, in the name of a certain demonstration. And that woman was Nida Aga Sultan. So again, not the same person and not even the same name, but similar enough so that there was confusion. She said that she's a university teacher. She woke up one morning and had a bunch of Facebook friend requests. It's like, that's way more than I should get. And then over the next few hours, she got another 300 or so Facebook requests. It's like, what is going on? Well, because her face was all over the news, but she was not deceased. Okay. And she's got students saying, I saw you on the news, and people coming to her house and saying, we saw you on CNN. She said that she confirmed everybody as friends who had wanted to add her on Facebook. She said some of them were international journalists, and explained that it was a mistake. I was not dead. I was not the same woman who had been shot dead. Some bloggers posted updates, but she said some journalists who received her message didn't do anything, whether they were ignoring her on purpose or just not checking their Facebook. Obviously, there's no way to know that, but that the incorrect story with the incorrect image continued to propagate. She said she received a lot of hate messages because, of course, she was a face that was representing a certain movement that not everybody in Iran is cool with, and that the original woman who did die, her family did release authentic photos of her, but she said it took up to 48 hours because they were grieving somebody, and it was like, it wasn't their priority number one necessarily to set the record straight about this other woman who had this case of mistaken identity. And the story just goes on to show you how much something it seems like, it starts out as just a very simple mistake, really spirals out of control, especially in a situation like this where you have a really high amount of tension and danger associated with the original story altogether.
Wow. It just, it's an awful story. And you know what? Unfortunately, I feel as though there are more and more stories like this happening. And although this is not to the same degree as far as being as horrible as this, I was hearing a story, I think last week when I was in San Francisco, it was on the news about an individual who had gone in for a job interview. And it turns out the HR manager had done a search online for this person and found a lot of terrible things about this individual, ended up not hiring them, but it was someone else with the same name. And you can see how these mix-ups happen. And again, this is definitely not as severe, but I'm not sure, Sarah, if you're familiar with the situation recently with, I'm sure you know the story, but the CIA director in the U.S. Resigning and the whole controversy around that.
Oh, yes.
But ABC News had posted a clip with his alleged mistress, who was the biographer of the book coming out, and they took a photoshopped version of that book cover, which was highly inappropriate and really was a parody of the original book cover, and they included it in their news report on ABC News. It was Channel 7, and I can't remember what city, but again, a highly inappropriate cover that someone had photoshopped and made up, and they thought this was a legitimate thing, just kind of being, I don't want to say lazy, but a little bit lazy in terms of doing their research online. So, this is just, I think, going to be a huge issue in our future, hopefully not as severe as the story that you just talked about on the BBC, but I see little pockets of things happening like this here and there.
Yeah, this is the sort of like, well, it's really easy for something to sort of go viral, and it's not necessarily based in fact, and sometimes, yeah, for example, something like a book cover, it's like, well, people who do their research enough go, well, that's not the real book cover, that's irresponsible reporting on the part of ABC News or whatever affiliate that was, and then you get another story like this woman, who ends up. I mean, this story gets crazy. We don't even have time to tell her whole story, but yeah. I mean, it got to the point where she was charged for being a spy with the CIA. And, that's the sort of thing that could end in a death sentence in her home country. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, just absolutely crazy. So it's definitely a nightmare. Not that this is something that I feel like we should all worry that this will happen to us, but just, it puts things into perspective. The next time you forward something along, be careful. Got to remember that stuff. Got an email from somebody that you know.
Yes, Laura Killian, who watches the show all the time and is also my co-host on Command N and involved in our family as well. So I know she's a big fan of the program. She's really tapped into social media, and she wrote us this email recently from her home in Halifax talking about last week when we were mentioning Instagram photos and all of the data that goes along with Instagram photos and the fact that it's very difficult to be able to sift through all of that different content. I had mentioned that Etsy does a really great job as far as their search functionality and all of the data that you can go through as far as searching by color and all these other features. And Laura had mentioned that on Etsy, the seller has to tag each item with metadata, like color, materials, and all this other information. So it's very sophisticated as far as the search. And she was making a comment that it would probably be very difficult to do something like this on Instagram because perhaps people didn't want to invest as much time in adding this data to their photos. And I think this is a valid point. On Etsy, you have a real incentive to tag all of your information because you're selling something. On Instagram, maybe not so much.
Yeah, especially since Instagram is all, well, you can upload a lot of different photos to Instagram, but the idea is like you take a photo on the fly, you don't have to worry about being the best photo in the world, you add a filter, all of a sudden it's more interesting, you give it a caption, you're done. You can add a hashtag if you want, but certainly it can be pretty instantaneous. So yeah, I think Laura is onto something where on the Etsy store, that, yeah, you want to give it as much data as possible so that it reaches as many people as possible and reaches the right people. I mean, you're incentivized to give it all sorts of different tags so that anybody searching for yellow or anybody searching for yarn or anybody searching for Elvis or, there's all sorts of stuff that might apply to your specific thing that you made or that you're selling on your Etsy store. So you want to put the care into that. On Instagram, brands are interested in Instagram. There's plenty of brands that I'm even following on Instagram. So there's certainly a level of attention to tag detail that I can see some Instagram accounts benefiting from. But for just the average person, we're all used to not having to do that. And I think, it would sort of seem cumbersome. I've even thought that it's always felt a little cumbersome on Flickr to add a bunch of different tags and kind of manage my metadata there, even though it does help the general data pool that Flickr can draw from.
Yeah, I think it really depends how simple you make the process of adding that information. So if you make it really easy for people to do, I think they may be inclined to do it. But if it's cumbersome or difficult, I don't think that people are actually going to want to invest the time and the energy into it, unfortunately. Now, Sarah, I promised off the top of the show that there would be cats involved. followed because I know you're a cat lover and there are many cat lovers on the internet. And this story is about Home Depot and their mascot for the holidays. It turns out they came up with this idea to have a mascot, and the mascot's name is Richard the Cat. And you will find Richard the Cat helping his family along as far as simple things to do around the home. And he has a Twitter account and also, or maybe, I guess it's a he, it's Richard, and also a Tumblr account. And Richard the Cat will probably be seen a lot more in the online universe as Home Depot approaches the December month. So kind of fun. Of course, cats are such a big thing online. An interesting idea to get some attention around the brand. The only disconnect for me, and maybe I'm missing something, is that when you see Richard the Cat's Twitter account and the Tumblr account, there's no real association with Home Depot. So I feel like there could be a better bridge or connection there.
Well, maybe that's intentional, though. I mean, okay, that is an adorable cat. I mean, he looks like he sort of looks like the kind of cat who would be into home projects, right? He's sort of rough and, you know, he's kind of scowly. I think maybe, oh my gosh, sometimes Richard doesn't look so good. It looks like he needs to get, you know, a nice little brushing or something. You know, he needs more omega-3 in his life. But this is kind of, I kind of like this because it's like, okay, well, Home Depot, they can't really have a cat that's like fixing anything, right? I mean, that doesn't really make sense. So they're like, okay, what would be something that someone would actually want to subscribe to? A cat account on Twitter, a lot of people would like to subscribe to that. And I noticed that in looking at the ad replies between Richard the Cat and the people that he's communicating with, certainly on Twitter, is a lot of it has to do with just home improvement projects in general. Right? And so there might be a link here and there to something like, ooh, yeah, you know, on Home Depot, you know, there's this, you know, can of paint, or I don't know that much about Home Depot, so I'm not going to sound like somebody who does a lot of home projects. But there are links that are going back to Home Depot links, but it's more just kind of the general conversation of, oh, you know, maybe it's time to fix that door, or you've got that home project, you know, in the garage that could might be time to do that sort of thing. So it's almost like a subconscious pushing people in that direction.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean,
it's not a secret that it's Home Depot associated, but it seems loosely associated.
You have to do a little bit of digging, I think, to figure out that it is Home Depot. But overall, I think it's great. I think it makes perfect sense. Cats online make perfect sense. People love them. And I think they do a really good job as far as writing of the tweets and the Tumblr account. Lots of really fun and creative stuff. So maybe they have some plans in the future to tie it a little more tightly to the brand. Or like you said, maybe they don't need to. Maybe it's good enough that they do this. So I think it's a really fun holiday campaign, and hopefully Richard the Cat will continue to have a life into 2013.
I hope so too. Is he a real cat, I wonder? Well, I mean, obviously Sarah, that's a real cat that there are a lot of pictures of, but I just want to believe that, you know, he's very happy with his little hammer and his little, you know, spackle.
I'll look into it and figure out if Richard's real.
Please do. And then arrange a meeting. And then I will also follow Richard. Perhaps I can follow Richard or Home Depot on Facebook, and then he can go into my Pages feed as well. So there'll just be one more cat that I'm paying attention to regularly. A reminder that we love hearing from all of you. Getting your feedback is the most fun. The email you can email us at is thesocialhour@twit.tv. Anything you have on your mind, whether it's a story you think that we should cover. And we got some great stuff. We got sort of fun stuff. We got poignant questions. We got links to some pretty heavy material. I mean, social it's a very broad, it's a broad topic these days. So anything that you think would be good for our show, please do send along. We really appreciate it. You can leave us a voicemail at 2626 SOCIAL. That's 2626 social. Amber, it's not even really worth mentioning, but I'm going to mention it anyway. One of our voicemails that we got this week, because people just, I don't know, they like to punk us or something, was about half of the song to Careless Whisper by Wham. So they didn't say anything else. So thank you for that, but it's not really, we can't play that. So, you know, maybe next time say something. Or you can record a video and upload it somewhere. Send us the link. YouTube works really well for people, but anywhere that you can host a video and then send us a link to where the video lives, we would love to see you asking your question or giving us a comment on something that we talked about, or giving us an idea. Okay, Amber, Rad or Fad is right around the corner. First, we want to take a quick break and thank SAP for sponsoring this episode of Le Social Hour. All right, so we talked in this show, maybe even more than ever, about the kind of the corporate side of social media. I mean, there are a lot of people who work in enterprise now. Enterprise cannot ignore social, not by a long shot. That's why social media solutions from SAP is such a great product to talk about on this show specifically, because people are commenting or complaining or having questions about brands via social media. You know, they're commenting on Facebook posts. You know, they're writing blog posts about stuff. They're tweeting. They're trying to get a hold of you, oh corporate person. And if you work in social media at a large enterprise, it can be extremely challenging to keep up on all this stuff. You know, sometimes it's kind of a cascade. As soon as somebody knows, oh, well, you can get a hold of this brand this way, well, now everybody's going to do it, and that's great. But then you have to be on top of it. You have to be responding to these people and giving them solutions. That's what Social Media Solutions does. 2 components. Listening component, and then the engaging component. The listening component is all about, let's take all of this data in and figure out what it all means. Did somebody say something that's negative about the brand? Okay, now how do we engage with that person? And how, if we've got a team of people, how do we make sure that that question gets routed to the person who's then going to engage to that person who said something negative? You know, there's kind of this flow that should happen organically, but you really have to be on top of stuff. And it can be very hard to do. When you've got a team and you've got a lot of data coming in, you want to make sense of it. Natural language processing is something that SAP does really well. That's actually processing what people are saying. If I'm working for a brand and someone says something about my brand, I can have certain words flagged. I can have certain sentiments read. And, you know, the whole idea between natural language is like, you look at a bunch of words and it's like, SAP knows to say, yeah, this is somebody who might be interested in purchasing one of your products. This is somebody who is not a happy camper, and they need to be responded to right away, and that should go through the customer service person rather than the tech support person. So there's all sorts of ways that you can make social media solutions work for you. SAP is really trusted brand in this arena, and they give a lot of options and flexibility to anybody working in the social sector in the enterprise. If you want to find out more, please go to sap.com/twit. Again, sap.com/twit, and figure out how social media solutions may work for you. If you work in a large regional or national enterprise, you probably want to get in touch with them and make your life easier. Okay, Amber, Rad or Fad? I think it's time.
Okay, so for this week's Rad or Fad, it is all about drinking and creating your own custom beverage, not necessarily alcoholic, but instead a beverage that could come out of a soda machine. And the idea is that you could go online, you could craft what your beverage could include from a bunch of different ingredients that were listed from this company called YouFlavor. They call themselves user-generated refreshment. And then your flavor could be sold from one of these vending machines in cities and buildings, wherever they end up putting these machines. And your particular soda or drink could have a custom label on it and other information. So you could notify your friends about this particular drink you've created so that they could share and get more information about it. So they call themselves the Flavor Gone Social, I think is also one of their taglines. And it's a couple of people from Purdue University. Not a ton of details about how this exactly would work. I think it's kind of interesting. I'm just a little bit puzzled in terms of the end result.
This sort of reminds me, does anyone here watch Parks and Recreation besides me? It's like one of these, there's this one guy who works for the Parks and Recs department who's always trying to come up with these like ridiculous like get rich quick schemes.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, YouFlavor, make your own drink, tell your friends, create buzz, build a brand, YouFlavor. This almost it seems like something that would be perfect on the show, you know, and you'd sort of get a laugh out of, because I'm trying to figure out like, what? Okay, is this, what, Amber, I don't know. I don't know what to think.
I know. And you know what, Sarah? I'm gonna help you along a little bit because I contacted these guys on Twitter, and it looks like they're keen to come on the show and talk more about it because there's a big social media angle to the drink. So you don't have to come up with a rad or fad right away. I think it's again, I go back to the word puzzling because it's hard to imagine what the end product would be like and how useful it would be. So I think it could be kind of rad, or it could be a big fat fad.
Yeah, if they want to come on the show and tell us more about not only why it's a great idea, but the social element, that's awesome. I mean, I think I could probably create a pretty cool drink that doesn't exist already. Mm-hmm. You know, you add a little lemon juice and a little. I mean, you know, I've got some ideas. I like to experiment a little bit. You know, like maybe some. Well, anyway, I'm not going to give away all my secrets, but. Yeah, and you end up getting a certain amount of money for each bottle that was sold, or even if it's like, I don't know if you can just sort of say like, I just want to make 100 of these and maybe have it as some sort of a like a gift idea for a wedding.
Exactly. It could be a promotional thing. It would be a great promotional item, right? Yeah. Or if you were a celebrity, you want to get the word out, maybe you were doing a new product launch, I can see the market for that. So the machines, I think, are a little bit more difficult to wrap your head around, the idea that your soda could be in the machine and how it gets there and how that process works. But hopefully if they come on the show, they could explain that to us. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll try to book them.
Good. That sounds good. So I'll say, for now, this seems like a fad to me, even if I were to, you know, buy a couple of novelty drinks that were made by, I don't know, my favorite Hollywood stars. I can't see myself doing that regularly, but maybe they make the best drink ever. So I don't know. I don't want to speak too soon. Gut says fad, but maybe the creators can set us straight.
But you're open to it being rad.
Yeah, exactly. If it's rad,
Perfect.
I'm not, you know, I am open. Yes, cautiously optimistic.
I love it.
Okay,
Sounds
Amber,
good.
we have come to the end of this episode of The Social Hour. It has been fun, as always.
Yes.
Remember, to everybody, we're live on Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Next week, we will be, I will be working off some tryptophan. Well, actually, I guess I don't really eat tryptophan because I'm not actually going to partake in the turkey. But next Thursday is Thanksgiving, and the TWiT studio is closed. All of the staff is going to be out doing other stuff for the U.S. holiday, Thursday and Friday. And so we will not be doing a show, but we will be back the week after that. And so, you know, don't cry. It's going to be okay. Just, you know, enjoy your Friday. Maybe take that much more time to send us social ideas for what you want to see on the next show. But again, Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, if you like to watch the show live. And if you don't, if you watch it after the fact on demand, that is great too. We appreciate each and every one of you. So thanks to everybody who tunes in with us each week from wherever you tune in from. Until next time, I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Amber MacArthur, and we'll see you next week.